Hello, it is finally time to talk about my favorite books of 2022. I love how everyone on the 3rd of January is apologizing for putting up their favorite videos late. And meanwhile, I'm just thinking, well, at least it's still January when I get mine up. So a little disclaimer before we get into the books. These aren't necessarily books that were published in 2022. In fact, I don't think any of them were. And also, I am not a literary critic, so I can't say these are the best books I've read, but they are the books that I enjoyed the most, the books that meant the most to me, and the books that were the most memorable in a positive way. I have 5 fiction books and 5 non-fiction books. Didn't do that on purpose, it just happened to be that way. So what I will do is I talk about the fiction books first and then the non-fiction books, and I'll talk to them in order of least favorite to most favorite. This order is not set in stone. On another day I might switch things around, but the top favorite will never become the bottom favorite, if that makes sense. So fiction books first. I'm going to start with an honorable mention. So the book is When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Sola. This is translated from the Catalan by Mara Faye Letham, and I didn't put it up in my favorites because the story as a whole couldn't quite grab me, and I had a hard time following it. But on a sentence by sentence level, this book is so gorgeous. The unique thing about this book is that every chapter is told from a different perspective, including animals and inanimate objects. And the first chapter, told from the perspective of a rain cloud, is just one of the most exquisite pieces of prose I have ever read. It is stunning. I couldn't tell you what happened in the book in the way of plot, but the writing is really amazing. So an honorable mention, but not a favorite. So let's get on to the actual favorites. The first one I want to talk about is The Member of the Wedding by Carson McCullers. This is a modern classic, first published in 1946. I have read The Heart is a Lonely Hunter before, which is one of my all-time favorite books. This book I didn't enjoy quite as much as The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, but it definitely cemented Carson McCullers even more as a favorite author. I think she writes young girls on the cusp of growing up very well. This is a coming-of-age novel. It's about a young girl called Frankie who lives in a small southern town, and she doesn't quite know where she belongs. We see her being bored and longing for a life outside of her little town. She's fascinated by other places, and she longs to travel. And she's not quite a child anymore, but no one takes her seriously, and that makes her lash out and act tough until she hears about her brother getting married, and she decides to be a member of the wedding. And in fact also a member of the honeymoon and a member of their married life. So that makes her all invigorated with new ideas and a new outlook on life. This is a book about growing up, about wanting more, about big dreams, but at the same time being comfortable in familiarity of daily life and wanting everything to stay as it was. And that balance is something that Carson McCullers captures really well. She captures the complexity of a young mind without being condescending. Her writing is beautiful. Every sentence seems deliberate without a word out of place. She's a master of setting a scene and evoking the senses. I read this book at the beginning of the year, and I can still vividly remember some of the scenes in this book. And in fact, the more I talk about this book, the more I remember how much I enjoy this. So yeah, that is on number 5. And on number 4, I cannot do this video without mentioning the Heartstopper series. And Volume 2 is my favorite book of the series. It has absolutely stolen my heart. I don't think I have to mention what this book is about. It's Nick and Charlie, they fall in love. And it was such a joyous, heartwarming experience. I love how Alice Oseman definitely tackles some more serious issues queer teenagers are dealing with, especially in the latter books. She dives more into mental health issues as well. But at the base, it was just this very sweet love story about these two boys falling in love, and like even though they face some challenges, you never worry that it's going to end badly. Yeah, just such a positive, joyous reading experience. Like I said before, I cannot read these books without having a stupid grin on my face. So I had to mention these. And then book number 3 is a book I only just read in December, and it went straight to my favorites. And that is Creatures of Passage by Morowa. Yejidé. This is a book that is set in the late 70s in a place that is recognizable as Washington DC, but with a bit of an otherworldly quality to it. We follow a group of characters inspired by Egyptian mythology, who are all in one way or another very closely connected to the afterworld, death, the underworld and all that. It is a complex storyline. I tried to give a quick summary of the book in my wrap-up, but I am not quite able to give it a quick elevator pitch just yet. Anyway, I was so impressed with this book. I love how the author weaves the storylines of these different characters together, how everything connects in one way or another. It is a book about death, about grief, it is about family, it is about your role in a community and how you can use that but also abuse that. I love how it comments on a lot of different things, but it doesn't feel bogged down. All these things quite naturally fit in together. And what I kept thinking about this book is how impressive it is that the author makes the book feel both mythical and ancient almost, but at the same time also incredibly current. It's one of these books I have to read again, because I feel like I've only just got the tip of the iceberg of the richness and complexity of this story. Definitely a book that has impressed me a lot. At number 2, we have a book that has been popping up in quite a few favorites lists this year, and that is Elena Knows by Claudia Pineiro. And this is translated from the Spanish by Frances Riddle. So this book is about a woman named Elena, and in the beginning of the book she learns that her daughter Rita is found dead in a church, hanging from the beams, and the police has concluded that Rita has taken her own life. But Elena's like, no, she would never do that. Something else must have happened. So she starts her own investigation, and she wants to visit this woman who she thinks might be able to help to prove that her daughter didn't kill herself. And that is basically what happens in the duration of this book. Elena traveling to and meeting up with this woman. Now, Elena has Parkinson's disease, and this book is divided into her medication, in that she takes several pills throughout the day, and they make her able to move. So I thought that that was very cleverly done. At the beginning of each part of the book, or each new pill, she's stuck and she has to wait for the pill to take effect, and then she calculates how much time she has to move and do the things she wants to do before the effect of the pill starts to wear off. And you know, at the end of the chapter she will have difficulty moving again. And I think this book is such a great representation of Parkinson's disease, or any chronic illness or chronic pain in general, in that Elena has to really think about her day ahead, plan her medication, and plan what she does in what moment, in a way that allows her to get as much out of her day and out of her body as possible. Now, Elena isn't a likable character. At points she is quite horrible and self-centered, but she's definitely a fully formed character, and I love how the author portrays her as a human being, flaws and all, and not like a disabled inspirational person. This is only a short novel. I think it's about 150 pages, but it packs so much in it. It's about mother and daughter relationships. It's about the healthcare system and the ableism surrounding it. It talks about abortion as well and how that parallels with having a disease like Parkinson's, in that it is about being able to make your own choices and the autonomy of your own body. So there's a lot in this book that happens over a short period of time, but still the author manages to tie it all together. The writing is beautiful, the pacing is very well done, so it all comes together very, very naturally. So yeah, another excellent book and well deserving of all the praise it's getting. And my number one absolute favorite novel of 2022 is Still Life by Sarah Winman. Now, this is a book I did not want to end. It is quite a chunky book, over 400 pages, but I was just so sad to leave these characters behind. This book starts in 1944 in a small Tuscan village. Ulysses Temper is a young British soldier stationed there, and Evelyn Skinner is a 60-something-year-old woman, an art historian who has come to salvage paintings from the wreckage of the war. By some unfortunate circumstances they meet and they are forced to spend an evening together, but they really connect and form a very special bond and a lifelong friendship. But after that one night they each go their separate ways. Evelyn goes back to America and Ulysses goes back to his life in London, where he works in a pub. And this book is just a perfect example of a found family story, which I am learning is one of my favorite tropes. In this pub, Ulysses has surrounded himself with this ragtag bunch of people who were at some point all lost in one way or another, and they found solace in each other. And I think that's one of the things that Sarah Winman does so well. You meet this group of people who have obviously gone through good and bad times together, and who have a complicated history, but she never explains this history or how they all got to meet. She just drops little hints here and there, and it makes the characters feel very complete, very complex. And what I love about their connection is that each of these characters is allowed to be their imperfect, flawed self, because they obviously have that history together. There is such a strong, loving bond between them, and they are allowed to make mistakes. They fight and they make up, but this strong core connection that they have really comes off across the page. And I love how Evelyn, who comes back into Ulysses' life at some points, just fits into that group as well. And then I haven't even mentioned yet that Ulysses gets and takes an opportunity to move back to the small Tuscan village he was stationed at back in the war, and his friends all at some point or another come with him and live with him in Italy. And this book as a whole, but especially the chapters set in Italy, are so incredibly atmospheric. Sarah Winman has such a beautiful eye for details. The way she describes the village, the landscape, the way the light moves, or the crumbling architecture, the food. It is also incredibly vivid, Anyway, I love this book. I loved being in this world. I love how it transported me to another place. I don't always connect so strongly to characters in a book, but I did with this one, and I enjoyed every minute of it. So on to the non-fiction favorites. I read some really good non-fiction books this year. Again, I've put them in order from least to most favorite. So coming in at number 5 is A Still Life by Josie George. So this is a memoir, and the author is an artist and a writer who has grown up with a disabling chronic illness, and she decides to chronicle a year of her life. So she starts in January and just talks about her day-to-day life. Because of her disability, she can't physically do very much and go very far, so her world is very small in a literal sense. But because of that, she is able to get very closely acquainted with the world around her, and she talks about how that influences her work as an artist and as a writer, and interspersed with that, she talks about how it was growing up with a chronic illness. And what I liked about this is that, yes, she talks about the difficulties of having a chronic illness. She talks about the ableism she faces. She talks about what she misses out on because of her disability. But she also talks about how her life is rich and joyful and meaningful in a way she would never had if it wasn't for her chronic illness. That it allows her to see the world in a more quiet, slow way that many able people don't have the capability for. And then in the middle of the year, and therefore also in the middle of the book, she quite unexpectedly to herself falls in love, and I love how she talks about how much that person means to her, what they learn from each other, and how they bring out the best in each other. And I love how this is something she could never have planned when she started writing this book, that her very familiar life suddenly got uprooted in such a good way. Yeah, I think it's great. This book kind of flew under the radar, but it is well worth your time. Then number 4 is an absolute classic in non-fiction writing, and especially non-fiction feminist writing, and that is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. This was first published in 1928. And I think everyone will probably know the essence of this book, and that is that a woman needs money and a room of one's own to create good art. And if you're like me, thinking, why would I read this book if I know what the message is? Please just give it a try. So in the book, the author talks about how she was asked to give a lecture on women and fiction. And at first she's wondering what approach to take, so she decides to take a walk around the town, visiting different places she hopes will inspire her and give her insight. And she takes you along as a reader to these places, and also along with her thoughts on the topic of women and fiction evolving during the day, and how what she witnesses during the day makes her think of new things. And I love how you get into the mind of a feminist thinker who has these great ideas, but they flow so easy and so effortlessly. It has this rhythm to it that you just have to go with. There is just so much wisdom in these pages. You can see how it has become a classic in feminist writing, and a base for so many consequential feminist ideas. Like I said, it is written in the 1920s, so in some ways it is very much of its time, but at the same time you can easily transfer her ideas and observation to modern day society. So A Room of One's Own, absolutely well worth your time. And number 3, we have Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. This was first published in 2012, and I feel like every year since then I have seen this book on at least one person's favorite list. So Cheryl Strayed at one point had a sort of agony aunt column in an online magazine where people could write in with their questions, dilemmas, troubles, anything they were facing, and she would give them advice under the pen name of Sugar. And this is a collection of those letters and the advice she has given. So in the answers she draws a lot from her own life experience, and she will give examples and what life lessons she took from them. And that, together with a very literary writing style, makes that this reads a lot more like a collection of essays rather than columns. And the way Cheryl Strayed answered these letters just took me completely by surprise. It was so honest, so wise, so from the heart. The way she manages to capture the heart of the problem the letter writing is facing is immediate and so concise and just so well done. She doesn't give these people an easy way out, but it is all done from a place of warmth and genuine compassion. I have already recommended this book to so many people. I think everyone will connect to at least one of the columns in this book, and I think it's a book that benefits from reading at different stages of your life, and each time it will give you a morsel of wisdom that you can take with you. We are reaching the end here. In second place, the runner-up, we have The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration by Isabel Wilkerson. And this is a book that is so exquisitely written, so well constructed. It takes this immense topic of the American Great Migration, where between 1915 and 1970 roughly 6 billion Black Americans migrated from the South to the North and the West in search of a better life. And the author frames this book around 3 individuals who were each part of this migration, but at different parts of the country at different times and for different reasons. And she places their stories in a bigger historical context. And I loved getting to know Ida May, George and Robert. 3 very different individuals, each with their own stories to tell. And because you get to know them so well, you realize even more that the author could have picked any other of the billions of people who migrated, because everyone will have their story to tell. This book is huge in scope, and you can see the amount of research that went into this is amazing. I learned a lot about this particular part of the American history, but also on how it connects with current issues of racism in the country, and the way she tackles this big topic, and yet makes it feel like such an intimate read is astonishing. And then my number one non-fiction book of 2022 is Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. Now this is a book that taught me so much more about myself, about life, about relationships, about society than I ever expected. So I went into this book thinking I would learn more about asexuality, because it was a part under the LGBTQ umbrella that I didn't know that much about, and I wanted to educate myself, but boy did I get a bit more than that. This is a book that has profoundly changed my outlook on relationships and society. What the author does is she takes different parts of life and society where sexuality plays a big role, which in itself is a lot more than I thought it had. And she talks about how she sees it and navigates it as someone who is asexual. And she lays bare the essence of these things if you take sexuality and sex away. I think this is a book that everyone should read, no matter what your sexuality, no matter what your age, no matter what your relationship status, because it will make you rethink human connection and intimacy and how society works. Yeah, it is so good. I love how with the fiction books I loved reading them, but I also know that they might not be to everyone's taste. But with the non-fiction, I'm like, read this book, you will be a better person after. So these were my favorite books of 2022. I didn't think talking about them all would make me so excited, but I love books. Aren't books great? As always, I would love to know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them. Are you interested in reading any of these books now I've talked about them? What were your favorite books of 2022? I love reading your comments, so please leave them down below. And I will talk to you in the next video. Bye bye.